Simon is the first one up. The question that was given Simon for his homework is, what is the future of agricultural engineering? Nice wide topic, Simon. I hope we've got 3 days to debate it. In particular, what can agri-informatics and robotics achieve in the next 5 to 10 years? Over to you, my friend.
Well, thank you very much, Nick, and thank you very much for that question. I think that engineering has got a major part to play, of course, in this area. We see a range of new technologies being developed all the time. Look at what's going on in IT, in space and control and so on. And we've seen, particularly with Philip's presentation today, how important machines are, and with the class presentation, how important machines are. We can't grow the crops and the food that we want without machines. But what I see happening in the future is the ability to be able to bring together a lot of these new technologies and develop more to allow us to come up with a complete new mechanization system based on small, smart machines. Now, we've seen lots of good examples of ways in which we can improve the crop production system, make it more efficient. My goal is, what is the minimum amount of energy that we need to introduce into the natural environment to turn it into productive agriculture? That's what I'm looking for. We use a lot more energy than we need to at the moment. We're quite wasteful, I think, in energy in all its forms, diesel, machines, fertilizer, chemicals, and so on. So we're developing a new concept called intelligently targeted inputs. Well, in fact, it's not new. It's something that we're all aware of, that if you know what's going on there, you can then work out what is the minimum amount of time, energy, inputs, whatever you need to be able to do the task that you want to do. And for me, dare I say, the killer application in this area of robotics is a project that we're working on at the moment, which is then something called laser weeding. Now, you're aware of the public disquiet about the use of chemicals. We saw, again, from Philip's work, where we can then intelligently target the chemicals, and hence then, if we don't pollute the environment, if it goes 100% onto the leaf of the weeds, then is every farmer going to become an organic farmer? It's an interesting concept. It's going to change a lot of things. And the concept that we're working on with laser weeding is that if we can use machine vision to recognize the meristem of the weeds, and then the laser is no more than a concentrated heat source. We heat up the meristem to 95 degrees C, the cell walls rupture, and many of these weeds, and the weeds I'm talking about are only about this big. That's a feature in the field when it gets that big, but when it's that big, it's a weed. We can then be able to control these weeds. We don't need chemicals. We've got a lot less energy being used, and therefore there's one example of the whole thing becoming significantly more efficient. When we do want to use chemicals, again using intelligently targeted inputs, we found that when we can use machine vision and then apply chemical only onto the leaf of the weed, we can save 98, 99% of the chemicals being used. So there's a whole range of different opportunities that we've got. Machines are getting bigger all the time, and as Trevor says, we're now reaching the limit due to railway tunnels, was the thing that I heard at class last time I visited there. The combines have to be moved on railway trucks, and the railway trucks have to fit through railway tunnels, and these machines are now designed to fit through railway tunnels, and so they can't be made any bigger. And we've taken that economy of scale. Well, these machines are very efficient, and the economies of scale from these big machines have given us many advantages. But as Trevor says, I think that we've now got to move much more towards the smarter side of things. And when we reinvent this system completely, then I think there still will be big tractors and there still will be people on tractors, but there is a niche for smaller robotic machines working as fleets within the agricultural environment, still doing what we want it to do, producing food, producing the requirements, but doing it in a much more significant, a much more efficient way than we are currently doing. So I think in my view, the future of agricultural engineering, where we're going to see the biggest impact and the biggest changes, is then going to come through this area of making the machines more intelligent, making them smarter, making them more efficient. As engineers, we love efficiency, and what we're really doing now is applying that same mindset to the crop production system. And so I think the future of agriculture engineering is going to be very much in terms of the smart machine area.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. Well done. Thank you. Our second panellist is Helen Ferrier. Helen, the homework for you, I believe, was an interest, again, a fairly broad-ranging question. In the next 5 to 10 years, what are the biggest economic, social and political considerations for farmers and also therefore agricultural engineers? Again, you have 3 days to give your answer.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to take part in this. For those of you that aren't aware, the NFU represents around 47,000 farm businesses in England and Wales, and we've also got around 40,000 members who support the countryside and rural issues. So it's a challenging role that I've got. It's very forward-looking. I'm very interested in how science translates into practice. It can be a challenge. So there's a bit of a leap of imagination sometimes here. For example, working out what it means, the potential for GM crops, for example, to be grown in the UK, the lag time between scientific discoveries and commercialisation can be difficult to get across sometimes to our members. And the NFU is very forward-looking. We have to put the effort in now to try and persuade and talk to regulators and opinion formers, politicians, partner organisations, the things that have to change now in order to create the right future for our members. So on to the exam question. Starting with the economy, some of the figures have already been spoken about, but certainly agriculture, even in the times of recession that we've had in recent years, actually has made an increasing contribution to the economy. So in the 5 years to 2014, agriculture's contribution actually increased by 45%. It's the basis of the biggest manufacturing sector, the agri-food sector. Latest figures worth £103 billion. And so that's the equivalent of 6.8% of GVA. But we're still a net importer of agri-food products, and agricultural markets are increasingly volatile, and that kind of trend is going to continue. So it's something that certainly the NFU has to put a lot of thought into. And we're currently working on some analysis to really articulate what the key performance indicators are for our sector. So GVA, output, profitability, investment, jobs, and also some specific sector insights looking at self-sufficiency levels, the potential for growth, the barriers to growth, and what some of the solutions might be. So what we really need to do is enable the farming industry to reduce trade deficits, reduce wastage. We've heard quite a lot of technological solutions to that today. Getting farm businesses closer to their productive potential. So it's not just increasing productivity, it's actually looking at what a farm business should be able to produce, and to produce in a profitable way. Tools to manage the volatility that we've spoken about, and a supply chain that's fair, that's functioning, that's stable. And really, when we're looking at the kinds of technologies and kit that's been presented today, there has to be a level of confidence to invest. So this report, look out for a report from the NFU about growth and the potential for growth. It's going to be published at the end of this month at some point. And then the other aspect of the kind of economic issues here are that agriculture, there's a lot of personal and emotional investment in agriculture. It's not just about the money. You've got farm businesses and you've got people in the industry who have got huge amounts of experience and expertise. They've got a desire and an ability in many cases to adapt, and have to adapt to changing world. And actually agricultural borrowing continues to grow where in other parts of the economy that's not happening. And it's not just because of low prices. So there's a high demand currently for infrastructure loans, for example, for farm businesses. It's also been touched on today about variation in performance, and being a kind of optimistic type of person, I think this variation in performance and costs of production that you can see between businesses actually shows that there's an opportunity here to improve that, because you can see that some people can achieve it. So on to the political side, well, that is obviously a huge area of uncertainty. You'll all know that EU regulation is a very significant impact on farming. That's the basis of most of our regulation. And we don't know what the next CAP will bring. So it's likely, the timetables aren't clear, but it's likely that in 2020 there'll be a new common agricultural policy. Who knows what crazy things will be in that. And also, I mean, closer to home, but obviously impacting at the European level, we've got the EU referendum coming up. And that is, could change things radically for agriculture. Another interesting NFU publication that you might like to look out for, that's just been produced, is really a collection of kind of facts and figures, which is really designed to give our members and other people that are interested in agriculture an idea of farming's current relationship with the EU. This is ahead of renegotiation, so we can't really take a stance at the moment because we don't know what the outcome of Cameron's renegotiation is going to be. But, you know, really, we need to know what it means for agriculture to be in the EU or to be out of the EU in order to come to some kind of decision when we're all asked to vote on it. And there's a clear link to the economy here. What's the impact of all of this going to be on the exchange rate? Because the exchange rate with the euro has big implications, for example, the basic payment scheme payments that farmers get, and also for the value of exports. And then finally, social. There are big changes in how farmers can access information. We've talked about, everyone's been talking about smartphones and tablets, etc., etc. There's certainly a trend, an increasing trend in adoption of new technologies. We've recently carried out a survey of our members about digital technologies, adoption and use and barriers to that. So 70% of those surveyed had a mobile phone with internet access, but very, very, very much lower numbers actually had any access to 4G. Only 15% reported that there was a reliable mobile signal across the farm, and 63% said that their broadband speed was insufficient for business. So all of this has an impact on the types of uses of technology that we've talked about. So there's a big message here in terms of the social side of it. There's definitely a desire to use more technology, but the digital connectivity thing is an issue. And certainly trends in the use of digital are certainly increasing. So there are more ways to get information to farmers. They've still got very diverse needs, extremely diverse industry. Basic computer skills for many are a barrier before you even consider the kind of high-tech kit that we've talked about today. Knowledge exchange is extremely important still. This equality of expertise between farmers and the technicians and the academics is really important to acknowledge. And then all the issues about privacy, data ownership. How can we get a value that's the farmer owns this data to an extent? How can we monetize that value in order to get them involved in things like the agri-tech strategy? So my conclusion is there's great uncertainty, volatility in the context of very long farming cycles in many cases. It's really challenging to manage. So what we want to do at the NFU is be able to build resilience into the industry. Engineering, technology and innovation is part of that. But the building blocks of digital connectivity have to be there. As a mother of 4-year-old twins dealing with multiple scraped knees, I'm very well aware of the perils of running before you can walk. Thank you.
Helen, thank you very much indeed. Our next panellist is Robert Merrall. Robert, I've been setting homework for Robert for many years. The question that was set for Robert was, can agri-tech learn from other engineering sectors? Robert.
Thank you, Dick, and thank you to the Royal Academy for the opportunity of being here today. I'm here really with an Institution of Agricultural Engineers hat on today, and IAGRI, I'm sure you know, is the institution representing professionals in agri-tech research and business. And really it's that linkage between research and business that I'd like to try and explore in part of the answer to Dick's homework question. Thinking about homework, I was incredibly fortunate to have been one of the first students through Professor John Parnaby's engineering doctorate programme, which combines research and management training. It was a little while ago now, I have to say, and the intense business-orientated Eng.D modules that formed part of that Cranfield MBA stay with me now, and I'm hopeful that a little bit of that has stuck, maybe. But I think that sort of thing is an opportunity that needs to be more widely available. We need to combine more engineering with more management. As a nation, us Brits are tremendous ideas people. I'm reminded of this on an almost daily basis. As Dick mentioned earlier, much of my current work is in monitoring Innovate UK-funded collaborative projects, which bring together companies and sometimes a university partner. And my role in that is essentially to see fair play and not to lead the project. But I'm there to help the group and help them to deliver the best possible impact, especially given that a proportion of their costs are met from public funds. So it's about enabling. A lot of those projects are in the agri-tech arena, but one or two are not. And I think really that's how we come to the question that Dick gave me. I've been giving some thought to other areas of engineering that we in the sustainable agriculture and food space can learn from. And after what we've heard today, you'll be unsurprised to hear me cite robotics and mechatronics as key areas we can learn from. Really fantastic technical things are possible and have only been possible for quite a short period of time. By way of an example, I'd like to mention something that a company called Shadow Robot have developed. They've developed some dexterous hands which form a key part of a robotic chef. Now, this robotic chef has been successfully taught to recreate all the actions of a Michelin-starred chef and successfully cook pre-programmed dishes using normal human equipment. And I recommend anybody Googles that. It's really quite astonishing. So crazy technical stuff is possible right now in a way that we really didn't think it might, didn't enter our heads. But more than the technical aspects, I think we can learn from the management processes involved in all of that. It's lean and agile approaches to development, ability to explore multiple solutions simultaneously, continuous hardware-software integration stuff going on, managing multiple challenges in parallel. That is a recurrent theme. The same sort of approach is evident in railway engineering. There are some really great examples of machine vision being used to create geospatial inventories and categorize rail failures before there's an incident. So those are two key areas. My third and final area is perhaps one you might not expect, but pharmaceutical engineering. I'm sure almost everybody in the agri-tech arena has had to validate at some point a new concept through field trials, whether they're collecting their own data or relying on somebody else's. And what I would say is that whilst I'm no great fan of red tape, the sort of discipline you need before you can put together a clinical trial has been a real eye-opener for me. And this means that pretty much any eventuality is covered off before it happens. And as most of you are very much aware, managing field trials is a real challenge. And I think there's a bit to learn from the pharmaceutical sector on this. But really, for me, it comes down to people and skills at the end of the day. We need to collectively do more to develop the right innovation skills in our graduates. Being technically brilliant only goes so far, and we need to do even more to help people create credible economic opportunities out of the technical novelties that they might be developing. So I'm about to become president of the Institution of Agricultural Engineers, and one of the things I'd like to try to do in this regard is to help do a little bit more to help engineers collaborate, communicate, protect their IP in a way that creates value. And so there's some thoughts about how we might do that going forward, and I think there could well be an interesting conference next November. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Robert. And our final panellist, Calum Murray. Calum's question was, how could the UK capture on-farm innovations more effectively, and what are the top tips for agri-tech innovators and entrepreneurs to go ahead and get ahead? That will be the easy one, won't it?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dick. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Great pleasure to be here, and as with the rest of the panel, thank you very much for the opportunity. To put things in perspective and to try and validate my credentials to be here, since the inception of the Sustainable Ag and Food Innovation Platform, Innovate UK, formerly Technology Strategy Board, have funded somewhere in the region of 200 projects through that platform, alongside a further 100 projects through the Industrial Strategies agri-tech catalyst. So these 300 projects that we've got in line so far have had the benefit of about £140 million worth of public investment, all of which is effectively match funded from industry. But of course, the reason we're doing all of this is with a view to driving forward productivity and to stimulate economic growth within the UK to benefit UK PLC as a whole. So what are these questions? On the first question, how can we capture innovation more effectively? Well, we're trying to do our bit with these thematic competitions and these projects. But in our opinion, within Innovate UK, the most effective way of tackling this is to look at things from a challenge-led perspective, particularly from an industrial-led challenge perspective. In other words, don't look for a home for new technologies. Don't force-fit things. We need to speak to practitioners. We need to speak to farmers and others along the whole supply chain, and capturing more effectively on-farm innovation is one element, but recognising the pull that comes from beyond the farm gate is critically important. We need to get those practitioners, wherever they happen to be within the supply chain, to articulate their true challenges, what it is that's vexing them. The issues of broadband, for example. How can you tackle some of these issues without the capability that may exist to others in city centres and so on? But to articulate in a way that's readily understood from by people outside of traditional agriculture. And this is what we tried to do when we helped facilitate the preparation of the Feeding the Future report. The NFU, the Royal Ag Society, the levy boards came together to try and engage with sectoral, all the subsectors within agriculture to find out what their innovation requirements were for the next 30 years. Now that document is 2 or 3 years old now, but it still, I think, is valid in terms of identifying the direction of travel. So this identifies the opportunity. We then need to spread the word, and indeed the net, to capture those people that can pull thinking through from as many technology sectors as is possible: energy, transport, health, and indeed space technologies. We have a thematic call that's running now, just now, looking to put £3.5 million or so, satellites to improve agri-food systems, engaging with those colleagues that have got specialisms in that area. So we need to pull that thinking together and to see where we can go with technologies that may not readily fit or be thought of as fitting. We've got great examples of bringing technologies from the gaming sector, for example, into the livestock sector to help with estrus detection, animal health, and so on. We need to widen our thinking outside of the box. And there's no doubt in my mind that it's industry-led collaboration, where the sum of the parts is often so much greater than the whole. We need to accelerate the delivery of these new innovations. But in order to accelerate the delivery of innovations and make things happen that wouldn't ordinarily happen, we need to have an infrastructure of support Now, we've been fortunate so far to have that financial support available. My friends from Whitehall across the road there have injected into these project finance some 140 million so far with the SAF IP and the Catalyst. We're going to benefit with the injection of capital into the centres that Willie was talking about earlier on. But we also need practical support, such as that available from my colleagues in the KTN, and Tristan's here today to help people with the concept of preparing project funding applications. And we need to be in a situation where, on the second question, we help those industry players that are coming forward with ideas to get their applications out there in a way that is going to deliver this economic growth. We need to get them thinking like an investor. We need to boil things down to the key criteria. We all want to back winners. We need to help them to sell the idea, ask the question, is it innovative, is it achievable, and most importantly, is it exploitable? What is the route to market? How can that be taken forward, and does it resonate with investors? We need to identify the market, where it is. Is it domestic? Is it global? Is it a niche element that Philip was talking about in terms of weed control? Or is it a national, international challenge in relation to endemic livestock disease, for example, or whatever? We need to get partners together that can work effectively together. We need to look at this collaboration and ask the question around what their experience is, what resources they have, what is their capability? Have they got the finances? Have they got the equipment and the staffing to deliver? What's the potential impact that's going to be derived from this? How significant will it be? And when, most importantly, when will it be achieved? A question that my colleagues in Whitehall are often asking. You know, when are we going to see the impact? When are we going to be confident that we can continue to invest? And for those that are seeking public support, we need to ask the question, why is it that industry cannot do it themselves? So often people write themselves out of scope by saying, we're going to make millions. That's not the point. We need to identify why this technology would not go forward without the public support. At the end of the day, we have to recognise that these are truly exciting times. One of our governing board members were heard to say that agri-tech and the bioeconomy is the last big space that is ripe for the picking. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd urge you, seize the opportunity, register with Innovate UK, see the support that's available, and drive things forward. Thank you very much.
Calum, thank you very much indeed, and thank you to all of our panellists for doing their homework so well. Probably at least 9.5 out of 10, you know, most of the cases. What I'd like to do now is to open the questioning to the audience. If you have a question, please hold your question until the microphone is with you, and please give your name and affiliation. What I'd like to do initially is to ask if there are any questions specifically for Willie, because he didn't have his slot earlier to take any specific questions that might be addressed to him. After a couple of those, then we'll move on to general questions, which he might want to answer along with any of our other panellists. So are there any questions of immediate relevance to Willie, please? Willie, I'm going to ask a question then from the chair. Whereabouts are we in this process of hoping there is going to be an epicentre? Is there any sort of light on the horizon when someone's going to press a button and say go, or are we still holding our breath and waiting for it?
Well, how political do you want me to be?
Not very.
Not very.
But honest.
Honest. I think the process has taken obviously some time, and I think everybody would like it to move forward to some degree of certainty. But I think the difficulties on both sides are probably there for different reasons. Stephen Axford here is probably the guy who can press the button. We're hoping he'll do it very shortly. It was supposed to be in the last week or so, but there were some further questions that came back from ministers, and I think at the moment you just have to say, well, unless these guys have any other comments, I think we would anticipate it should go ahead, but there's no way we can predict that it is going to go ahead, which will be very disappointing.
yes, I think the whole room would be very disappointed if it didn't happen. And we just have to be patient for a few more weeks and keep our fingers crossed for all of the partners that are involved.
But, you know, I have to say, if you look at the strategy and you look at how much data engineering and technology is written into the strategy, then it would be surprising if the government, you know, weren't keen that this was a way to move forward.
Thank you very much. Are there any further? One right at the back, David.
Sorry, not for Willie, but I wanted to pick up the question that you posed to Calum. My name's David Gardner. I work for Innovation for Agriculture, which is a consortium of 15 agricultural societies doing knowledge exchange. You asked the question, how can we capture innovation from farmers, farm-based innovation, and this morning at Westminster a project was launched called Innovative Farmers. It's a partnership of ourselves, the Soil Association, the Organic Research Centre and LEAF, and it gives farmers a framework in which to work to do on-farm experimentation with scientific resource and get involved in the whole world of innovation. So that has moved as of this morning, and there is now a framework that will bring farmers together to make that work.
Excellent, David. Thank you very much indeed. Let's roll the questions out to any of our panellists. Maybe multiple panellists would like to answer. Any further questions, please?
Simon Harrison, Fellow of this Academy. It's about 50 years since my grandfather retired from farming, and at the time, technology at the day was generally on hydraulics coming onto tractors, and it has moved a long way. Willie commented earlier that in terms of productivity, the UK is slipping behind. And Helen said that in terms of farming, the lack of IT skills is a significant problem. And I'm just left wondering how much the challenge here is about agri-tech and how much the challenge is really about getting the latest agri-tech accessible to the farming community across the whole width of the community.
Thank you very much indeed. Who'd like to take that one? Is that Simon? Is that something for you to?
Yes, I think that's a good distinction between the technology itself and getting it into the farming sector. I find myself in that situation from the university point of view. We see many new technologies being developed. Of course, this is technology push. We then have got the market pull on the other side from the farmer's point of view. But there still seems to be, even though we're very successful with Calum and Innovate UK, the hundreds of companies that are involved here, but I still think that there is a gap between these two. But somehow, I think, you know, we might sort of like to organise it a little bit, but it still is a bit of perhaps a bit of a mess, and collectively inside this mess we move forward. But I do think that there is a huge opportunity that we're missing at the moment in terms of being able to utilise these technologies on farm. That's why I asked Trevor about how farmers look at these technologies. And if it is a generational thing, that's going to be a bit of a shame, because that means we've got to wait years and years and years. But I think that there should be ways in which we can help educate the farmers to understand the use of these technologies, and so they'll be able to adopt them and make money out of them and do all of these good things that they can do once they adopt them. But we are still in a bit of a sticky situation at the moment, I believe.
Helen, anything you might like to add to that, because you're close to the farmer end of it?
I think I probably said when agri-tech was launched that if you look at that graph with the productivity stagnating, and if that's the thing that agri-tech wanted to, or one of the things that it wanted to address, that you can't limit the impact of agri-tech just to the early adopters. If you want to make, yes, the big businesses and the people that class are selling to, yes, they're probably producing a large amount of output, but it's got to get out to enough people to make a real difference to that graph. And so I think we are not going to to criticise the agri-tech strategy. I mean, it's just amazing that the government thinks that this is a good sector to invest in. Brilliant. I wouldn't have thought that 5-10 years ago. But it's got to be identifiable to as many farmers as possible. It's got to mean something to as many farmers and growers as possible. And I think this point that I made extremely quickly about somehow valuing, putting some figures on the data that farmers have, data in a very wide sense of the word, so that can be that data and the expertise and the knowledge and the equipment or whatever that farmers have can be valued as an in-kind contribution to enable them to be part of these centres and these projects, because they haven't got the cash of Harper or Class or whatever to be an industrial partner, but they're the ones that could change things as a result of the research. And then I know that this is the Royal Academy of Engineering, but it's not just kit that this is about. It has to be about all the other things that farmers do to manage their whole system, and management practices. Yes, decision-making tools are very important, but understanding the whole farming system comes from research as well and should be part of agri-tech. And that is actually obviously much more difficult to value. There isn't a product that you can say, we're going to sell this for this amount of money, therefore the government will get this return on investment. But somehow that valuation has to be done.
Thank you, Helen. Calum, you wanted to say something, I believe.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a very good question. I've, in the early part of my career, been involved in extension services, working for ADAS in the early days, working for Scottish Agricultural College, advisory work, and with private consultants. And we have to strike a balance as to where we put efforts. Skills and the identification of the skills gap is very, very important. It's an integral part of the industrial strategy for agricultural technologies. And I know that people like John Shropshire are chairing that in the Leadership Council and taking it forward. But the things that we're doing is not about best practice. You know, this is an ongoing challenge. That said, one of the considerations we've got in our strategy refresh within Innovate UK is looking at the way in which we can accelerate this adoption of new technologies. If we can embrace the skills that are being developed, but take it out literally into the field in the way of implementing large-scale demonstration projects, not just variety trials and so on, but large-scale demonstration projects that could maybe show the adoption of new technologies to allow for the cliche of looking over the fence and seeing how things are done, understanding the economic impact of any given innovation. All of that, working with Leaf, working with Grace, working with whoever, we'll find, and with the input from you good people, to see what particular projects are best and most likely to deliver earlier adoption of these new opportunities. So it's very much on the horizon.
Willie, please.
We actually, in Deborah Hargrove, we've got very little money. All the focus of the R&D that we do is focused on working collaborative with farmers. Right? So we try to take a farm problem and try to find solutions. But the key here is that the actual gizmos that you develop, you shouldn't look for the farmer to be adopting them in isolation. They should be part of a solution. And I think it's a mistake, for instance, that we've maybe made in the past. We put in a machine that can measure pigs' birth from a camera, and you go, great, the farmer's now got his growth rates. So what? It doesn't have context. Unless you can join the vet, the nutritionist, the other advisors, and the farmer in terms of understanding the economic impacts, sharing what the target should be, and then come back and joining up to a kind of collaborative management strategy to try and achieve the target, then all you're doing is creating technology just for the sake of it, and that's a waste of time. And I think, for me, the focus on our bit is not about technology, it's about dealing with problems. And we can, some of the stuff we've developed there means you can monitor the behaviour of pigs, for instance, a big project we're doing, which is an Innovate project with Newcastle. But we've got the vets and ourselves working together to use the cameras, to monitor the behaviour, to record the weights, to look at variance. only so you can communicate with the farmer about how best we move it forward. So,
thank you all for those comments. As Simon was talking, I remembered back some probably 25 years ago, Simon, when we started a master's degree called IT for the rural sector at Silso, which grew to be one of the largest MSc programs on the books at the time. I'm not sure that a master's degree is what every farmer wants in order to learn the IT, but coming back to some of those basics and getting the right professional development program might be a way of accelerating progress in this area. So thank you very much indeed for your considered answers to that. Are there any further questions, please? Right at the back, thank you.
Thank you. I introduced myself as Peter Goodhue before from the University of Liverpool. I'd like to change my allegiance to an outfit called NMITE, which you probably haven't heard of, because I think the panel has just identified a hugely important issue, which is people. We've heard a lot about technology, but people are key. You may not be aware there is a movement to establish a university in Hereford, which currently is called MNITE, the New Model in Technological Education. And this is the first time in my living memory, and I'm quite old, that a university has ever been started from a blank sheet of paper. And one of its chosen themes is agricultural engineering, because Hereford is rather agricultural, I'm told. So my homework question for the panel and you is, given a blank sheet of paper, what would you see as the key attributes of a graduate from this new university when we're hoping to start taking undergraduates in 2018? There'll be graduates available from whatever 3 or 4 years beyond that is. What would you like them to look like?
Who wants to start that one off?
Okay, well, everybody's looking at me. So.
Well, you have the only undergraduate programme in ag-engineering in the country at the moment, Simon, so go for it.
Well, yes, to answer the first part of your question, what direction would you go? I'd say I wouldn't start from here, but the issue is agriculture engineering is a multidisciplinary and a pan-disciplinary approach. We look at all types of engineering solutions and concepts and theories and so on to be able to aid the production agriculture with all its diverse aims and needs. So inherently, agriculture engineers have got to be not just a foot in theory but a foot in practice, but also have a finger in every pie that's going on to be able to allow you to understand the difference between engineering and biology rather than agriculture engineering, which is a melding of the two. When I was working in Denmark, they did away with the agriculture engineering and said, well, okay, we've got plenty of good engineers, we've got plenty of biologists, plenty of agronomists, let's just bring them together and we've got the same thing. That just doesn't work. You've got to be able to understand all these different aspects. So a fundamental aspect of agriculture engineering is the appreciation of all the different factors that come into this area. But if I was to put my money and my career where my mouth is, I would say that the biggest development in this area, so to start off with, you've got to have that grounding in all of those different areas. An agriculture engineer is defined as 60% engineering, 40% agriculture. But if I then look at, from my perspective, where are the biggest changes, where are the biggest opportunities going to come, it's going to be in this smart area, this smart systems, IT, connected, big data, decision support systems, biosensors, the list can go on and on and on. And it only really reflects on the basis of agriculture engineering that it's got to be pan-disciplinary as we go forward. But where we are seeing the technologies being developed most quickly outside of the agricultural sector are in the IT side of things, then I think that we are going to get this crossover, this development coming into the agriculture engineering sector, because farmers need that level of support to be able to take advantage of these technologies.
Calum, thank you very much, Simon. Calum?
I think this probably applies to any university, to any young graduate coming forward to help with the challenges that we're all facing. Let's take it that the academic requirements of engineers in the agricultural sector are taken as read. They're inherent within the capability of the individual. But a willingness to be flexible, to be open-minded, to be curious about the opportunities that exist. But more important than anything is a willingness to change and adapt. An ex-colleague of mine once came into a meeting wearing a T-shirt that said, change can sometimes be difficult. Not changing is often fatal. And that's what we need to instill in young people, is this opportunity to look outside of your own discipline, to see what is being delivered in other areas, other technologies, and see the solution or the potential for that solution in whichever field you're working. If it happens to be agriculture, then all well and good. But those principles, I think, are what are required in anyone coming forward into today's environment.
Thank you very much indeed, Calum. Just to add to that from the chair, I was thinking whilst my colleagues were giving their thoughts, I think number one is to capture the enthusiasm of youth. Number one. I can remember I did an extremely good program in ag engineering as an undergraduate, but I felt at times I was over-engineered, that somehow some of the innovation was driven out of me by Timoshenko and Young and stress theories and other things. It's all important, but keep it into the right balance with the applications and the innovations. And so keep the innovation going, because youngsters, especially those that are coming from many farm environments, have got some very, very good ideas that can be taken forward. That doesn't mean to say that you don't teach sound principles of engineering. That has to be done right across the disciplines. How Simon and his colleagues manage to do that at Harper Adams at the moment, I don't know, because everything is an expanding discipline. And it was bad enough 50 years ago when I went first to do an undergraduate program. But no, there's an awful lot more to know. Maybe some of that's encapsulated in software, but nevertheless, never mind. You still have to understand what's behind that software rather than just pressing buttons. So keep, as Simon has said, get that right mix of the bio and the soils and the agronomy into the mix of mechanical, electrical, civil, electronics, engineering skills. There was one key mechanical engineer that we had as an undergraduate textbook. Thankfully, I can't remember his name, but I heard him stand up once and say that an agricultural engineer is just a mechanical engineer in welly boots. Now, maybe today he needs to be an electronics come mechatronics engineer in welly boots. There is an application where the welly boots is very, very important, but that's not to be looked down upon. 2 years ago at Harper, we opened a new auditorium. And it was funded by, some of the money went into it from the Douglas Bomford Trust. And we got a group together of former agricultural engineers that were in the business, about 7 or 8 speakers from around the world. Mark Moore from AGCO stood up when he had his session. He said, "I've got the best job in the world." The trouble was, everybody else afterwards disagreed with him, that they had the best job in the world. But that was brilliant, for the simple reason it meant that ag engineering is a bloody good career. There are lots of challenges, and people can achieve excellence in doing that. And when I was at Illinois, we used to wear, as Americans would do, these things that protected your pockets from your pen, and it said, "Agricultural engineering, the profession with a future." And I think we've seen that there is a future for that. Can I have any more questions, please? Toby.
I've got a statement first, but also then a question. I personally think that the future of agricultural engineering is female. And in ECAL, more than half our people are come from the distaff side, as they used to say, and we don't find any problem in training people to become, in effect, engineers. All that heavy engineering with spanners and stuff, that's history. It's all about data, it's all about presentation, it's all about understanding quite soft systems, cow behaviour, animal behaviour. So I'd say the future is very female. Right, now for the question, which is very much to do with policy level stuff, which I'm glad we've got. I mean, I know in the audience we've got some high level policy people. There seems to be a disconnect between BIS, which is grab the agri-innovation, and that's brilliant, and DEFRA, which is funding things like the Countryside Productivity Scheme, which no one really knows about, which would actually buy some of the kit. And there doesn't seem to be any sort of joining up there. So that's a question. How are you going to join DEFRA and BIS into presenting a united front?
I think it's fair to say, when Dick introduced me, I was involved very much, not now because the agri-tech strategy is in place, but the cross-Whitehall working group that looked at this industrial strategy for agri-tech was a very coherent group that drew people from DEFRA, very willing participants, in fact, very strong secretariat from DEFRA, into a room in BIS to put them together to think about the opportunities for growth and productivity. And I know that they are genuinely interested in that. I know that there are huge challenges within and across all departments, looking at cuts and reorganisations and so on. And often I think the challenge or the issue is the loss of personnel that have the experience and knowledge of what has gone before. I don't think there's a lack of willingness to engage and recognise these changes. But to have a high level of consistency and continuity running through a programme such as the industrial strategy would be a way that I think things can be improved, to simply have that continuity in place. I don't think you can force-fit things together. I don't think you can make people show enthusiasm for an area that they're not genuinely interested in. But I don't think that's the case. The people within DEFRA are genuinely interested. They genuinely want to see growth, as do the people in BIS who recognise the opportunity that exists within agri-tech. And it's really refreshing to see two departments coming together in that regard. It's just that we need to give each of these departments sufficient confidence, funding and continuity to see the personnel that are actively engaged stay in post long enough to deliver.
Very good answer, I think, yes. Okay, so thank you very much indeed for all your questions. It's time for me to draw the session to a close. I was asked to see if I could make one or two comments as we close down. The interesting thing that appears to me is that the industry, the topic, agriculture, has had some fairly significant difficulties over the past 10 to 15 years. I think what amazes me, maybe it shouldn't, is that despite all of that, we've got a very good set of well-demonstrated innovations that, despite maybe the lack of funding, a downturn in agriculture and not being seen as being important, has actually come alive and bubbled through. So just think what we can do with some extra impetus and backing from everybody, from the politicians right down to the man in the street, who beginning to understand that agriculture is important. And I think the best way of doing that, Simon, will be for you to get the robotic chef on British Bake Off next year, because everybody watches that, and it will be as popular as Countryfile, or even more popular than Countryfile then. So we ought to see something still pushing out there with the media to make sure that agriculture and food and fishing alongside it all do well. I am sure it behoves all of us to wish the potential consortium Godspeed with their endeavours, and we hope that they will be able to hear before very long whether or not that consortium can go ahead and do the job that is so critical for the UK and the world. And I would like to thank all of our speakers and our panellists for their most interesting presentations and the answers to their questions, and especially glad to see Willie back on the podium with us, and hope you continue to grow from strength to strength from now on, Willie. Thank you very much indeed for that. There will be a short report from today's discussion, and it will be published in a short while on the Royal Academy website. I also have been asked to remind you that this is part of a series. The first started in 2012, and it goes on, and before very long there will be another one, but not necessarily on agricultural engineering. I would like to thank the guests for their participation. I hope you've all enjoyed the afternoon, and could you give one further round of applause to the speakers and the panel members, please.